Hi guys, James at RampantLionReviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to head down to Australia once again, and we're going to go to another brewery that I've never tried anything from before. So as I mentioned to you in my last Aussie review, the last time I was down there was in about 2015, and at this stage the Aussie beer scene was just starting to take off, and as has happened in many other places in the last few years, things have exploded down there, so there are many new breweries to explore and lots of new beers to try, which is something we'll never complain about. But I do need to get back down to Australia to visit my family and also to get some more filming done. So you can rest assured when I do make it down there, there will be more sit-down reviews and many more out-and-about things filmed as well. But yeah, for this review today, we are going to go to another brewery I've not tried before, as I mentioned a second ago. We're also going to go to one of the Australian states that's hardly been covered on the channel. When I was there really wasn't very much going on in terms of craft beer in this state. But this is one of the new breweries that has popped up in the last few years. They do some very good beers from what I understand, quite a variety of different styles, but the one we're having a look at today is a style they've become particularly well known for, actually. So needless to say, I'm very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good one, hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this beer as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head to Brisbane in Queensland, specifically the Newstead district, and we're going to have a look at my first beer from Range Brewing. So this particular beer is called Feeling This. It comes in at 8.6% ABV, and this is another New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. So yeah, I picked up this beer at craft beer based Mother Tree in Umeda here in Osaka in Japan, and like I say, they seem to get a good variety of different Australian things, so I need to keep an eye on this going forward actually, because always cool to review new beers from different countries, and we haven't covered too many breweries from Australia, I have to say, which is something I do need to work on actually. But yeah, definitely cool to return to Brisbane, a city that I had a very, very good time in, and if I was to move to Australia, I have to say Brisbane would definitely be one of the places that I would think about. Really enjoyed it. My aunt and uncle live a little bit further out west in St George as well, so yeah, Queensland would be a good place to go. But yeah, definitely cool to visit Newstead Brewery for the first time. Special shout out in this video as well to Sam Smalley, who is a long-term follower of my channel and various other European beer tubers as well. Lovely guy, very knowledgeable about his beer, and I'm sure I'll hook up with him in Australia at some point. But I know he's been enjoying seeing some Australian beers, which is great since he's followed the channel for a very long time. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what it's all about. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the link to my other reviews that hopefully I can do in the future from Range Brewing. Very first time I'm trying one of their beers, as I mentioned, but there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. Just go to the homepage, use the search bar, put your hometown, state, county, whatever you like in there. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Australian playlist along with a number of other things. Hopefully we can add to that more going forward. But yeah, you can also check out the playlist of beers from the other countries in there as well. But yeah, let's crack on then and chat a little bit about Range Brewing for the first time. So, Range Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in the Newstead district of central Brisbane in Queensland, in the southeastern part of the state. Brisbane is of course the capital, but the company was founded back in 2017 by Matt McIver and Gerard Martin, who were joined soon after by Mitch Pickford. So the two original guys, Matt and Gerard, are childhood friends, and they lived abroad in London. So Matt worked for Brewdog in Soho and was also the brand manager of the London Craft Beer Festival, whereas Gerard is an engineer by trade and worked in mechanical and manufacture engineering, but in London he was working for Vitso, who are quite an interesting company if you want to look them up. But apparently the idea to start their own brewery came after a few too many beers, and they wanted to be able to travel and sample the best beers in the world and then brew their own versions of these. So Matt and Gerard contacted their friend Mitch, who also happened to be a talented brewer, and he worked for Catchment Brewing in Brisbane at the time. But he was of course interested when he heard that his friends were thinking of starting up their own brewery. He wanted to get on board, and soon Matt and Gerard were back home in Queensland and building their own brewery. Originally they had planned to start the brewery in their hometown of Toowoomba, which is about 2 hours out to the west of Brisbane. Very nice town that you should visit, but they decided that Toowoomba wasn't the best fit for them, and so they opted for Brisbane. So the brewery opened in early 2018 in an old warehouse in the Newstead district, and this is where they also have their own on-site tap room, and they also sell pizzas there, which are supposed to be very good too. But over the years they've expanded their brewery infrastructure, and in 2022 they opened a second tap room in Abbotsford in Melbourne down in Victoria, and this site also acts as their southern distribution hub. But until 2022 these guys didn't have a core range of beer, and they were just producing lots and lots of different stuff, which people thought was a bit of a crazy move, but it has worked out quite well for them. But in 2022 they introduced their first sort of forever beer, as they call it, which is Disco, and that one has gone down pretty well from what I understand. As of April 2023 though, when I'm filming this review for you, these guys have produced 500 different kinds of beer according to Untappd, and when you consider that they've only been around, around 6.5 years, and they've produced 500 different beers, that's at least one new beer a week. More than that, maybe like 2 beers every 3 weeks or something when you calculate it out. So yeah, a very prolific brewery. They do a lot of different styles, and I do hope we can try a few different things from them going forward. But yeah, that is all I can really tell you about Range Brewing for the moment. 3 guys who have very good beer pedigrees behind them from what I understand, or very good pedigrees for starting a brewery. But yeah, it's going very well from them from what I can gather. But yeah, if you want to learn more about these guys, you can of course check out the brewery website in the video description below. You can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Untappd page to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. So yeah, let's crack on and have a wee look at the beer itself. That's everything I can need to tell you about the brewery. So yeah, I'll just let you have a little look at the artwork on the can here. It is very nice actually. This one is quite reminiscent of a number of the IPAs that I've had from Europe and the US. This is of course a 440 milliliter can though. You can see plain silver top there. But yeah, feeling this, you can see the Range Brewery symbol just above that there. Of course the camera doesn't like the silver artwork on these ones, unfortunately. Having to film at night while my son is asleep, so I don't get a lot of noise in the videos and stuff. That's just how it goes these days. But yeah, as we said earlier, this one is an 8.6% double IPA. I believe this one is a New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA. But the hops in this beer are Citra, Nectaron, Strata and Centennial, all hops that we are familiar with. Citra, of course, American, 14% alpha acid, big juicy mango notes out of it, a little bit of lemon lime quite often as well. Nectaron comes from New Zealand, about 11% alpha acid. It can give you quite a lot of juicy mandarin-y orange in my experience, but sometimes a little bit of pineapple as well. Strata, another American hop, I think that one is about 16% alpha acid. Gives you a kind of strawberry note from what I remember, and a wee bit of like an almost gooseberry quality. And then Centennial is a little bit of a more old school American hop, 12% alpha acid if I remember correctly, and it gives you this lovely big kind of lemony zesty type quality. So quite an interesting mix of hops in this one. Nectaron, as I've said in a couple of the other reviews, I only encountered that within the last year or so actually, but I think it's been around in Australia and New Zealand for a bit longer than it has been in Europe. You know, hops go in peaks and troughs in different parts of the world. But yeah, feeling this 8.6% double IPA, let's get it out and get on with the tasting. Just need to be careful with these cans because I'm not sure exactly how old these Aussie beers are, but we'll get this guy out into the glass and see what it's all about. So I think that will do for the moment, and we'll fire the rest of it into the glass a wee bit later on. And I'll just turn my computer screen off because we are now done with the brewery notes, and that makes the video look a wee bit better, I would say. No blue light in the background. So anyway, as you can see, this beer is poured pretty much as you would expect from a New England Hazy double IPA. So yeah, before the head disappears on this one, we can see that it's poured with about a 2/3 finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head. I wouldn't describe that as being perfect white. You can see the bubbles in this one are kind of medium sized. But yeah, that head is going to fade away to be a thinner, more foamy layer as time goes on. It's already doing it in fact, but there's a nice ring around the edge of the glass, so I'm not sure how visible that is going to be to you guys watching the video. But you can see that this beer is poured a lovely, quite bright and rich yellow colour. I wouldn't really say there's an amber tint to this one. I think it is more just a very rich yellow at 8.6% ABV. This is leaning toward the stronger end of the double IPA part. You maybe could argue that it's verging on triple IPA territory, but you know, for me, triple IPAs would probably be about 10% and the quadruples would be 12 upwards. But yeah, kind of a bit of a grey area there on exactly where the style borders are, to be honest with you. I would say above 8% is double, anything else is kind of single. But yeah, this looks quite nice. But yeah, remember the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is also going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise and thus you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts that you put in will affect the colour of your beer as well. But yeah, you don't often have to care about those latter two variables when it comes to IPAs of any description other than fruit IPAs. But the level of haze on this one is pretty nice. It has got a good level of opacity to it, and remember the hazy component in these New England IPAs often depends on the oak content, wheat content, and to a degree what yeast you use as well. But yeah, nice looking beer, I have to say. Not too much in the way of visible carbonation. I don't think we need to say anything more about the appearance of this beer. So let's just have a little look at the aroma and see what it's all about. Oh, yeah, that's quite interesting. Now I will say that straight away I can tell that this one isn't in its prime condition, so we need to remember that. You know, I'm not sure how long craft beer based Mother Tree had these beers for, but yeah, the Australian ones, you would consider with the time for them that it takes for them to get up here, they're not going to be in their absolute prime. So the reason I can tell that is you can smell with the oats. The oats are giving you a little bit of dryness in the aroma of this beer. And as I've always said, when it comes to the New England IPAs, if you look at the oaty character, the creamier it is, the fresher the New England IPA is, the more dryness you get out of it, the older it is. It's a kind of rough indicator, actually. So I think this beer is somewhere in the region of like 6 months old, something like that. And I think that was the same with the other ones that we had. But they're still in good condition and they still taste nice. And as I say, cool to cover some Australian breweries for you here on the channel. But anyway, the first impression that I have of this beer is that it's a good mix of, it's got a good balance between the wheaty and the oaty component. It's got quite a pungent floral character too, which I think is most likely down to this presence of the Strata and the Centennial, but you've also got some lovely tropical, juicy, fruity notes to this one. But overall, a very nice beer. As I've said in many reviews before as well, for me there are 6 elements to think about when it comes to the flavours and aromas in New England IPAs. The first would be the farmhousey and yeasty character, and then the rye-lean and grainy side of things. Those two are a little bit more prominent in American brewed IPAs in my experience, or New England IPAs I should say. But then in many other ones you've got the wheaty bitey side of things, the oaty creaminess, the barley malt bread, and then the sweeter side. So yeah, these are all the things that you want to think about when it comes to your New England hazy IPAs in my mind. But let's break the aroma of this one down a wee bit more and just describe it for you a little bit more in depth. So yeah, for me, the backbone of this beer, you've got a lovely little bit of a kind of fresh white bread crust, but it's almost got a little bit of a kind of brown bready character as well, and I've noticed that with a few of these Australian IPAs. Now it might just be because they are a little bit older and not quite as fresh, but I would assume that the Australians do have a number of their own malteries and things like that, and potentially these breweries are using malt from some Australian company that I'm not aware of. Of course, most of the malts that we will get in the European beers come from Germany, but a number of them will use British or American malts as well. But yeah, for me, this beer, the bread crust is a little bit, it's a mix of like a fresh white bread and also a little bit of brown bread, and it feels kind of familiar from the other Aussie beers we've tried so far. But yeah, there's a little bit of woodiness in there and quite a little bit of cracker. I do get a good little bit of Jacob's cream cracker out of this, out of the backbone of this beer. But on top of that, there are some lovely there is a little bit of a wholemeal brown bread in there, like a regular wholemeal brown bread, but a lot of fluffy white bread too. At the back of the nose, I'm getting a little bit of a kind of wheaty, bitey kind of character, which I do enjoy, I have to say. And then, yeah, the aroma that's, the aroma that kind of breaks out beyond that. You can smell that the wheat is just densifying out the whole beer. The more that I smell of this beer, the more pungency I get from the wheat, but then sitting above the wheat is the oaty character in the beer. So as I said earlier on, this beer does show a little bit of oaty dryness, but you still get some of the creaminess, I would say, and the dryness is just the product of the fact that the beer is a little bit older. But then there's a wee touch of sweetness to this one, but not overly much. Like in the middle of the nose, you do get a little touch of a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy thing, maybe just a little tiny hint of a McVitie's digestive biscuit, but not really. This one actually strikes me as being a little bit more akin to one of the more old school Swedish New England IPAs, like when the style first arrived in Sweden, the Stigbergets Amazing Haze, the GBG Beer Week 2016 beer, or OO Brewing Narangi, or Opigård's New Sweden IPA. But yeah, the oaty character in this one is quite nice. So this beer for me really has a good balance between the oaty side of things and the wheaty side of things, but we'll see how that pans out in the flavour. Other than that, I don't think we need to say too much about the malty side of things. These are all things we've seen in this style before. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, for me, the green component in this one, it has a little bit of earthiness to it, but mainly it's quite bright and floral. Now, as I've said many a time, when it comes to IPAs, assuming you have a 90-minute wort boil, of course, there are 3 different types of hoppings that you can use. Early addition hopping within the first hour of the wort boil gives you mainly bitterness. It's a bit of basic chemistry there. You've got more heat for a longer time, so you can extract more chemicals, thus you get the bigger bitterness in your beers. In the latter half hour of the wort boil, you get when you have the hops in there, that's late addition hopping, you get a little bit of bitterness, but mainly flavour and aroma. And dry hopping after the wort boil is complete, you get a nice little bit of, you get quite a lot of flavour and aroma in there. So New England IPAs tend to rely on late addition and dry hopping. West Coast IPAs use all 3. In the aroma and the flavour, that usually, early addition hopping usually dominates and translates to a more kind of deep, dank, piney resinous type quality, whereas late addition and dry hopping give you a more bright and kind of zesty, floral and grassy type note. And of course, it depends on what kind of hops you're using as well, because you've got pellets, you've got cryo oils and all these things these days. The oils tend to give you a more wet character to your green component in my experience. So all of these factors are at play here. But yeah, with this one definitely there's a lot of bright floral character in there. For me, I think I've always found that Strata has a really all of these hops will have quite a bright floral character to them, but Strata would be the one that would stand out to me in that regard. And there's quite a bit of grassy, zesty character too, which I think is most likely to come from the Centennial. But yeah, Citra and Nectaron are going to contribute there too. But yeah, quite a bright floral note, a little bit of grassy zestiness in there. I think that covers the green component of this beer from the aroma perspective. So let's look at the fruity side of things then and see what that's all about. So yeah, for me, on the fruity side of the beer, it's kind of as you would expect if you know these hops. The Citra has given you the typical little bit of kind of pungent grapefruit and passion fruit. Lots of juicy mango as well, and wee hints of like apricot and pineapple. So the Nectaron's going to contribute to the pineapple, I would say, as well. But the more that you smell of this beer, you start to get a little bit of that wetter kind of strawberry from the Strata. Strata is a really interesting hop in that sense, with just the wet kind of strawberry character. But then you're also getting the Nectaron, which is giving you, it's contributing to the pineapple and maybe a wee bit to the kind of apricot notes that the beer has as well. But there's quite a bright, juicy orange in there, and you've also got this kind of lemony, zesty character. If you, right in the top of the nose at the front, you've got that big lemony, zesty thing that is characteristic of Centennial. So yeah, lots of interesting stuff going on in this beer. Quite an unusual hop combination, I have to say, but there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. So yeah, As I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy the aroma of the beer before you get stuck in, but I think it is time for us to try this one now. So this one is the Feeling This, an 8.6% New England Hazy Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA, from Range Brewing in Newstead, Brisbane in Queensland in Australia. Let's get stuck in. Slàinte, skål, cheers. Yeah, I'm going to say straight away, this beer, when you actually taste it, it comes across as being a lot more fresh than the aroma would have you believe. That's quite interesting. But first impression of this beer, it's a lovely big sort of creamy and juicy New England IPA. It leans a lot more toward the oats than I thought it was going to. I really thought this was going to be a little bit of a battle between the oats and the wheat, but the oats come across as being very, very fresh in this one actually. So yeah, lovely beer this. Big thumbs up to Range Brewing, and if you know, I think we do need to check out a few more of their IPAs and their other styles, of course, going forward. So yeah. But yeah, first impression of this one, like I say, big oaty, soft creamy New England IPA, a little touch sweeter than I thought it was going to be. The grain component is even smoother and lighter than I thought it would be as well. But then you also have the big juicy fruity notes coming out of this one too. It's a lovely, lovely beer, this one. Big, big thumbs up from me. Yeah, one of the picks of the bunch when it comes to the Aussie beers that I've tried on the channel here so far. So yeah, let's try and break this down and just describe it for you a wee bit more, but this is good. This is pretty damn good, I have to say. So yeah, impressed. The Aussie beer scene seems to still be going, well, seems to be going even stronger than it was when I was back there in 2015. Very easy to drink, this one, for 8.6% too. Bit dangerous. So, let's start there in the middle third of your palate. So, middle third of your palate, I can safely say with this one, the backbone of the beer, you've got a lovely little bit of that fresh white bready breadcrust there, and it does give you a wee bit more graininess the further into the aftertaste that you go. Absolutely. Toward the front of that middle third of your palate, you'll get a little tiny bit of woodiness. I often get this in New England IPAs. For me, there is a little touch of woodiness in there. You've got a layer of sort of Jacob's cream cracker as well, which is very nice. And then above that, you definitely have a little bit of you absolutely have a little bit of a kind of there's a wee, it's mainly white bread that you're getting out of this one, but there is a little touch of like a kind of buttery wholemeal brown bread in there. So there's a wee bit of that sitting above the cracker, but then you get a nice fluffy layer of fresh, slightly doughy white bread. Above that, you can feel the wheat, and the wheat in this beer really isn't that bitey at all, to be honest with you. I would say that this one, the wheaty character really is acting as like a densifier and a smoothing agent. But the wheat in this beer is lovely. But then, like I say, this one, for me at least, it leans more toward the oaty side of things, and that's one of the areas where the aroma of this beer and the flavour really kind of diverge actually. So yeah, for me, above the wheaty character, you can feel the oats, and like I say, this beer seems to be in really nice condition. Actually, I have to say that about it. The wheat, if you go down the middle line of your tongue, you can feel this lovely big creamy oaty character that just pushes its way out of the beer, and yeah, I mean, as you go further out toward the edge of the palate, it stays quite creamy in that middle third of your palate. You just get a little touch of dryness as you reach the extremities of that middle third of your tongue. So yeah, the oaty side of this beer is really nice, and it is quite an oat heavy, creamy New England IPA, this one. In the dead centre of your palate, you'll feel a little circle there where there's a wee bit of a Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of thing. And yeah, that's the alcohol obviously in this one. But 8.6%, it covers its alcohol very, very well, I have to say. And perhaps as you go further into the aftertaste, you'll get a wee bit more kind of McVitie's digestive, biscuity kind of character. So yeah. Yeah, so yeah, the middle third of your palate in this one is very, very nice. Yeah, very light, nice malt base in this one. I think a lot of people underestimate how important the malty and yeasty side of these New England IPAs actually can be. There's a lot of focus on the fruity and hoppy side of things, but it's all about balance for me. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you do get a little bit of a kind of white bready build-up in there, and on the back third of your palate, the layers are kind of similar, but they just come across slightly differently. So yeah, backbone of that, the backbone of that back third of your palate in there, you can feel a little bit of a kind of bread crusty sort of dryness to the beer, which is very nice. So a little bit of bread crusty dryness in there, and it's a little bit drier than it is in the middle third of your palate. Above that, you can feel the crackery notes as well, which are drier again. Then you've got a kind of wholemeal brown bready layer there, which feels a little bit taller and a little bit more airy, and it is a little bit more apparent on that back third of the palate than it was in the middle. Above that, you get this nice airy white bready character coming out of the beer. And then, yeah, above all that, you get the wheaty notes, and there is a little touch of like bitiness or whatever there above the white bready layer, because you know the wheat is obviously giving you that little touch of character out of it. So yeah, the wheaty bitiness in this beer for me is very, very minimal. The wheat really is acting as a kind of smoothing agent in this beer. But above everything on that back third of the palate, you can feel there's a little touch of like a more airy, farmhousey kind of bready character there. So lovely airy farmhousey bread. You've got a little bit of a McVitie's digestive biscuity note, and they're a little bit of honeycomb actually. But yeah, a wee touch of woodiness. So yeah, these are the kind of characters you're getting from the yeasty side of the beer. But definitely on the back third of the palate, you can feel the flavour is taller. Then as you come forward into the middle third of the palate, it just condenses down and squashes together that little bit more. But yeah, onto the hoppy side of things then. The back corners of your palate in this beer, there is a little touch of earthiness there, but as you move further forward along the sides of your palate, you'll feel there is a wee tiny bit of pine resin underneath this one. But yeah, as you move further forward toward the kind of front corners of your palate, this beer gets gradually more and more kind of bright and floral. There's a wee touch of spiciness in there, but not overly much, I have to say. Round the front curve of your palate, there's a little bit of a more oily, grassy note to the beer. Wee touch of zestiness coming out of there, which I have to say is quite nice. But yeah, the way that this one goes together is really quite nice. The green component just matches up with everything very well, I have to say. Yeah, and the fruity side of this beer is really well done. So, on the front third of your palate then, where the fruits are going to come out, the border region between front and middle third of your palate, you can feel again there's a little bit of a kind of mix of white and brown bready build up there. The base of that front third of your palate is a little bit more, there's a little bit of a more kind of bread crusty character in there, sort of like smooth white bread, and a little bit of a more, yeah, a little touch of a brown bready sweetness as well. But then you get that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. And yeah, at the back of that front third of your palate, there's a little bit of a more, yeah, there is a little touch of a more kind of pungent passion fruit. It's not quite grapefruit, I'd say it's more of a pungent passion fruit. That's going to be from the Citra. Then as you move further forward, big juicy mango qualities, and as you reach the middle of that front third of your palate, there's a little touch of apricot in there, maybe a wee bit of peach as well actually, there's a little bit of that peachy sharpness, and then you have the pineapple, the oily pineapple sitting on top of that. So most of that is going to come, most of the back half of the front third of your palate is coming from the Citra, but I'm guessing the Nectaron will contribute to that as well. But as you move into the front half of your palate with this one, you can feel there's a wee bit more diversity in there. So you can feel there's this oily strawberry character from the strata, of course, and it's going to give you that. I get a little touch of gooseberry underneath it, which I think is most likely to come from the Citra, but then there's also that kind of tangerine orange in there from the, as you move further forward from that, you can feel there's also this tangerine orange. And actually, the very, just behind the very front tip of your tongue, you can feel there's this really bright tangerine orange sits on top. Then you've got the really zesty lemon from the Centennial sitting underneath that. So yeah, it's like Citra kind of dominates the back half of that front third of your palate. Then the Nectaron, Strata, and Centennial are kind of all doing their thing on the front half of the front third of your tongue. So yeah, the way this goes together is really nice. Yeah, I do like how this one goes together. It gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I do. Yeah, the way that this beer goes together on the fruity side of things is really nice, like a big, creamy, juicy New England IPA. Cannot fault this one at all. I have to admit, I would be very curious to see what one of their West Coast IPAs or the black IPAs are like, or just a completely, you know, one of their lagers or stouts, just to try something else from this brewery as well and see how it is. But, you know, certainly wouldn't say no to another New England from these guys too. This is a really solidly done beer, in my mind. One of the more creamy and oaty and juicy New Englands that I've come across in the last wee while. But I think that covers everything we need to say about the flavour. Let's just round off with a look at the mouthfeel. So as I've said, this is a very kind of creamy and oaty leaning New England IPA. For me, I think it's kind of pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied, bottom end of full-bodied. It kind of sits in that region. The carbonation is very smooth. As we said, really juicy, kind of creamy mouthfeel to it. IBU-wise, always take my IBU counts with a bit of a pinch of salt, but I think this one, I think it could be about 40, but I wouldn't be surprised if it is about 30. I don't think it's any higher than 40 though. So yeah, for me, maybe about 40-ish IBUs would be about where it is. Lovely little tiny touch of dryness to the malt base, a lot of smoothness though, a little touch of sweetness, and the fruity side of things is very oily but still very juicy actually. So yeah, the way this beer goes about its business is very nice, and it gets a big thumbs up from me. So yeah, I'm very pleased with this one, I have to say. This is a very good introduction to range brewing, and definitely cool to see that there are craft breweries in Brisbane that I can go and visit when I no doubt visit there again. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This was the Feeling This, an 8.6% New England Hazy, Imperial Double, whatever you want to call it, IPA from Range Brewing in Newstead in Brisbane in Queensland in Australia. Very impressed with this one, and as I say, the Aussie beers seem to be getting better and better as time goes on. So yeah, let's leave it there. Once again, thank you for watching my beer reviews. Until the next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this one in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Range Brewing as well, and do let me know some other Queensland breweries that I should check out should I get the chance. But yeah, in the meantime, check out my social media, check out their social media, and I'll see you guys again very soon. Slàinte, skål, and cheers.